Hi, I'm Mark Howard, County Executive of Montgomery County, and you're tuned into MACO's Conduit Street Podcast. Whether you're a Maryland resident, a government official, or just someone interested in learning more about public policy in Maryland, this podcast is for you.
Hello and welcome back to the Conduit Street Podcast. This is Michael Sanderson. I get the reins and the microphone once more to bring you some information, insights on county government issues, politics, policy, and Maryland leadership. And I'm excited to have a guest joining us this week, Faith Leach. She serves as the Chief Administrative Officer for Baltimore City. Now, most Maryland insiders know this, but Baltimore City actually is treated as a county in most respects under Maryland law. They're a member of MACO, and they share traits with a lot of our large jurisdictions as well as with other cities around the country. So they get a chance to double dip. They're a member of the Maryland Municipal League as well. So with that, wanted to talk with Faith about a number of things going on in Baltimore City. Glad to have you here. Welcome, Faith.
Hello there. Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Well, delighted to have you on. And I thought this could be interesting. I'm interested in your role with city government and sort of the path that you've taken to get there. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to do some like nuts and bolts along those lines. And let's start with your path in public service and the kind of stuff that you've done and that you've focused on leading up to your role with Baltimore. And then we'll talk about the Baltimore gig.
Awesome. So thank you so much for that question. I'm so very excited to be here. I love all things city government, and so really excited to talk with you and your listeners today. So as you stated, I'm currently the city administrator here in the city of Baltimore, but I've spent nearly 20 years working in local government. So I actually got a master's degree in public administration with a focus on city management several years ago. And since that time, I've worked in a number of city governments. I worked in the city of Durham, and I spent some time in their Office of Economic Development. I then moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I worked in Mecklenburg County in the county manager's office, where I worked on budget and performance issues in Mecklenburg County. I left Mecklenburg County, went to the city of DC, and worked in DC for nearly a decade. And I worked in multiple offices in DC, including their city administrator's office. I also worked in the Deputy Mayor for Education's office, our state education office, or DC State Education Office. And I also was responsible for building a first of its kind deputy mayor's office that was focused on economic opportunity in what DC called overlooked and underserved communities. After decades in local government, I actually did a short stint in the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
So I packed up from DC, moved to New York, and I worked on Wall Street for close to 3 years. And so I worked at JP Morgan Chase, which is the largest financial institution in the country. And then I got a call from the folks in the great city of Baltimore and was recruited to come to Baltimore during the pandemic and serve as the Deputy Mayor of Equity, Health, and Human Services. And about a year and a half ago, a little over a year and a half ago, I was appointed by Mayor Scott to serve as the city administrator right here in the city of Baltimore.
So terrific. I'm trying to connect the dots here, but that's quite a portfolio of interesting issues that you've immersed into in these various stations. But being engaged in sort of like government efficiency and then in expanding opportunity and economic development, targeting underserved areas and so forth, I can see how the mayor thought you made sense as a fit for the deputy mayor's role, and then relatively quickly turned around and said, you're actually the ideal candidate for the city administrator role. So can you talk to us a little bit about the city administrator job, like a day in the life of the Baltimore CAO? Give us a little nuts and bolts about what you do on the regular for the city of Baltimore.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first, I have the best job in the world. I absolutely love my job. I absolutely love the city of Baltimore. And I'm so proud to get to work for the residents of the city of Baltimore every single day. The first thing I will tell you is that there is no day that is the same. Every single day of my job is very different. But most of my days are filled with meetings with agency directors. I'm digging into service delivery models, and I'm also working to manage the city's budget and financial outlook, and looking for opportunities to grow our revenues, right? And so those are some of the kind of big picture things that I'm doing on a day to day. But I'm also, really getting granular on some of the basic city service delivery challenges that we've had around things like parking enforcement. I'm very big on comparing the city of Baltimore to our
Mhm.
peers in the state of Maryland, but also to our peers nationally. I want to know what the city of Detroit is doing. I want to know what Pittsburgh is doing, and Cleveland, and any number of cities, as well as our peers right here in the city of Baltimore. So I'm always asking our agency directors, have we looked at what other peer jurisdictions are doing? Right? There's no new challenge under the sun that someone else hasn't grappled with, and so I'm always kind of pushing our team to do kind of that comparative analysis. But in addition to kind of the, nuts and bolts of digging into core city services, I'm also on the scene with the mayor, if there is a major emergency like an underground explosion or
Right.
when the Key Bridge collapsed, for example, I was by his side day in and day out helping to manage our emergency response. And when possible, I like to be in community. That is very, very important for me, is to be in community and to connect with and hear directly from our residents, because at the end of the day, they're our customers, right? They are who we serve. And so when possible, I'm attending community meetings and attending community events and really getting to know the residents of the city of Baltimore.
All right. I like that framing, and I want to take the nuts and bolts. Like I say, so you kind of walk through these various administrative functions and agencies and so forth that you're connecting with and trying to help coordinate and do some steering for. But I want to bring some of this back to the almost like eighth grade civics level or ninth grade civics class, and just say I know that there are smaller cities and towns that have a variety of different structures of government. And one of them, there's sort of a fork in the road for a lot of small towns, whether they have a strong mayor structure or a weak mayor structure. And I know that it's reasonably common, especially for smaller towns, to sort of hire a city manager who really is the CEO of the city government. And then the city council serves as a legislative body, but the manager really runs the show. I think that you typically call that a weak mayor, if maybe the president of the town council is also the mayor, but it's really a city manager who runs the show. That's not the model in Baltimore, right? So Mayor Scott is still a strong mayor, has a full role in legislative process and a veto and appointment authority, and he's not just a figurehead in city government. So if someone was under the impression, and there could be misinformation about this, that having a city administrator as a fairly newly created role rendered the mayor as a second tier player, that's not the case. He's still the head of the executive branch, but you're the professional helping to make sure that all the oars are rowing at the same time, and the agencies are meeting their targets and that kind of stuff. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. Mayor Scott is the CEO of Baltimore City. And you can think of me as his COO. So Mayor Scott provides the vision and direction. He provides kind of the policy vision, and I am there to help him implement, and I'm there to manage kind of the day-to-day operations of city government. But he absolutely is the final decision maker and the final visionary when it comes to the city of Baltimore. So we absolutely have a strong mayor form of government here in the city of Baltimore. And I would argue we have one of the strongest mayor form of government that I've seen across the country. I've actually worked in both a strong mayor and a strong manager form of government. So when I was in the South, a lot of governments in the municipal governments in the South have more of the strong manager form of government. And the further
Right.
north you go, you tend to see more with that strong mayor form of government, but they still have managers. And so again, for anybody that's wondering, Mayor Scott is the CEO of Baltimore City.
And I think he makes that clear. But I thought for folks who have a background in municipal government, it's not uniform, and it's the same thing. We have county governments here in Maryland and across the country who have a wide variety of shapes and sizes and structures and so forth. So it's no surprise that most places let their local governments determine their own governance structure. So that's the case here in Maryland. Baltimore's structure looks pretty similar to most large cities, with a strong mayor and a council as a legislative body, and having some degree of check and balance between those two branches and so forth. So, all right, I appreciate putting that in perspective. I like the comment you made about the residents of Baltimore being customers, and that having that mentality for city government seems like a healthy and productive and positive way to go about your business. Think of them the same way as a customer for a retail outlet or for a manufacturer. I guess, city government, you're not making widgets like the old, economic or business models from the classroom. You're not in the widget making business, but you're in the business of delivering service and providing assistance to people who live and work and play in the city. So, that's the nuts and bolts of city government. I like that way of phrasing it. Is that a tone that you're trying to set across city government with leaders and with employees all the way down the chain?
Absolutely. The tone here is that we have to be responsive, and this is about our residents first, right? Our residents are customers. We operate to serve our residents in the city of Baltimore, and we have to be responsive to their needs. And so that is absolutely the tone that I am working to set across city government, is that we have to prioritize our residents. We have to listen to our residents, and we have to make it easier for our residents to give us feedback, to get services, right? And for us to respond to their needs. So that is absolutely the tone that I'm setting here in city government.
Right. I know that's always one of the things that Mako, we try to do our best to provide some onboarding for newly elected officials. And a big part of the change of tempo tends to be for newly elected officials who arrive in local government or in county government or as a city council member for the first time without having had a service, sort of a public service obligation before. And the mentality of listening to your residents and your communities, rather than just, hey, I think I know best. I know what they need. I know what they want. I'll lead, they'll follow. There needs to be a lot of bottom up, and that can be different if your last job was as a used car dealer or whatnot, and now you're a county commissioner. It's just a totally different game being in the public sector and being engaged in true public service. It's just different than a business. It requires a different mindset to some degree, but you still shoot for excellence, right? There's some themes that run across, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, governments exist to serve their residents, right? That is what we have to remind the public servants that work throughout the city of Baltimore, is that we exist to serve residents. That is our, main focus, right? Of course, we want to be able to support our visitors and other folks that come into our great city who want to enjoy our amenities. But it's really about serving those folks who call this place home or who work here in our city. And that has to be the focus, is being responsive and, really keeping our eye focused on the needs of our residents.
Right. Spot on, I would think. So I guess those of us who work for and with and around elected officials, we know that sometimes the mindset can be sort of the 4-year political term, can define beginnings and ends and new beginnings and so forth. And with this mayor hoping to receive a second term and another 4 years to continue some of his priorities and the administration's priorities, I'm interested for our listeners, some of whom are probably Baltimore residents or follow Baltimore media, but some of whom are farther afield. They're from other parts of the state or even outside of Maryland and just um, oddly interested in local, state and local issues like we cover. Can you walk us through like a couple of things that you think are on the to-do list that you are looking forward to, or may take some time, or like new opportunities opening up because there's whether a new technology or just a focus of this administration? What things could we expect in and from Baltimore in the years ahead?
Oh, absolutely. I, for one, am very excited about Baltimore's future. And I will tell you the number one thing that we're going to be focused on is growth. Growth in our population, also growth in our tax base, and just overall growth of our city.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to be a recurring theme throughout the Scott administration. And it's going to take a number of forms, right? We started a process about a year ago to focus on the city's 10-year financial plan, right? So we're doing long range planning for the city of Baltimore to set us up, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next 10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so as a part of that overall financial plan that we're building, we're looking at everything from our service delivery models and how we can be more efficient now and what new technologies we can bring on board so that we are, developing services and delivering services that are more efficient and effective. We're looking at ways that we can diversify our tax base. We're also looking at ways that we can reduce the tax burden on our residents so that we can grow our city. We're looking at ways that we can be even more aggressive with pursuing new businesses to come into the city, how we can further refine and build our technology sector, given that we were selected as a tech hub, right? There are
Mm-hmm.
so many opportunities that we're going to be focused on in the mayor's next term and over the next 4+ years. But I would say the theme throughout all of them is growing the city of Baltimore.
Right. So I would have to think that housing has to be a meaningful component of whatever plan the city has in mind for growth, being able to be part of a Maryland solution for achievable and affordable housing for folks who are in blue collar, middle class workforce and so forth. I know everybody drops statistics of the many thousands of housing units that Maryland needs to build to get up to speed, and there some of that has to take place in lots of different parts of the state, just because there are local needs and that sort of thing. But I'd have to think that Baltimore could be a site for some real growth in housing opportunities. You got some neighborhoods that are in the midst of an upturn and an upswing, and it seems like there have to be opportunities in Baltimore for people to make a home, find a community, and sort of build an upward trend for their own lives. That's got to be part of the vision for growth in Baltimore. Is housing is got to be a fundamental element, right?
Absolutely. Housing is actually core, I would say, to our growth
Yeah.
strategy. Hopefully you, and I'm sure some of your listeners have heard about the mayor's $3 billion plan in order to address the vacant housing crisis once and for all. And so the mayor, along with our partners at GBC and Build, came together to look at the city's vacant housing stock, right? So we have anywhere on any given day between 14,000 to 14,500 vacant housing units across the city of Baltimore, right? And with our current level of investment, it would have taken us more than 300 years, right? Like to be able to address the vacant housing crisis, which means that we would not be able to actually address it. We were only putting anywhere between $7 and $10 million a year into addressing vacant housing. And so we've been able to work with our partners at the state to get creative around some of the Project Core funding and how we could be using use and leverage Project Core funding. And we've been also looking at our own local strategy of doing kind of a neighborhood TIF, if you will, where we actually pursue TIFs in some of our communities where there are vacant housing, and use that TIF to use the sale of those houses to pay back the TIF or what have you, which is a new solution that multiple governments are looking at as well. So we're very, very, very much focused on how do we get our vacant housing stock back into productive use. In addition to that, as a part of our broader 10-year financial plan, we've been looking at just that. how many housing units can we absorb annually, right? What does our current housing stock look like? And we've been thinking about strategies that we can put in place to incentivize more growth and building of new housing stock in the city of Baltimore, right? When we looked at research, the large majority of folks are looking for something that is new or feels new or newly
Right.
renovated. Right. We actually don't have a lot of new housing stock that's going up, but you see surrounding counties that have more of that housing stock. And so we've been digging into some of the challenges and why we're not seeing the new townhome developments at such a rapid pace. Some of that has to do with the city process, right? It also has to do with challenges with land, right? And just developers being able to access land that's throughout the city. So we've been looking at everything from some of our surplus schools that sit on large swaths and plots of land, and they're right in communities and neighborhoods. But there are challenges with moving, those properties because you have to demolish the surplus schools, right? So we've been getting very thoughtful and creative about how can we diversify the housing stock by addressing, one, the 14,000 plus vacant housing units that we have in the city, but also how can we make it easier for developers to come into our communities and also develop new housing stock as well. And then we're also thinking creatively about downtown, where we can pursue more commercial to residential conversions in our kind of downtown core. So housing is absolutely going to be core to Baltimore's growth.
Well, I'll tell you, my quick response is, I can tell you're a genuine public administration nerd. And I mean this in the absolute most flattering possible way. Just spitting out details of what the plan is here and what the objective is there and what we're going to have to deal with over here. Like I can tell that you're a get your hands dirty kind of administrator rather than the White Tower. We have other people to take care of the hard stuff. No, you're digging into this stuff. I like it. So if you don't mind, I want to dig into one thing that you mentioned real briefly, because I think this is an interesting idea that I haven't heard of in Maryland before. You mentioned a TIF, and for our listeners, that's a tax increment financing. And I think the old school idea of tax increment financing was usually around sort of a big central economic development project. Some new company's going to come in. Oh, we're going to open up a factory. It's going to mean this many jobs, blah, blah, blah. And you cut some sort of a deal like through the economic development office or somebody like that and say, well, how about this? We, the local government, can help build some of the infrastructure so your new location can thrive. We'll put in the pipes, we'll widen the roads, we'll put in the new crosswalks or other stuff like that. And the way we'll pay for those improvements is we will pledge the extra tax revenue that comes from the development that's going to follow. So, yeah, I think a lot of people hear about that at taking a class on public administration or public policy. You hear about that as a concept, and it has its pros and cons, but it is a fairly traditional way to bring in sort of an anchor new development. But it sounds to me like this is a variation on that theme. If the city's thinking, well, we could take the tax increment financing concept and just do it for a neighborhood. If we invest in the infrastructure in this neighborhood and make it an attractive place for more development of housing or for mixed use or for commercial, then we'll grow the tax base. We'll have more taxes coming in from the area, and we can pay off maybe the bonds we had to float to do all the improvements on the front end. Even without sort of the anchor tenant concept, this still actually sort of rings a bell and makes sense. That's what the city's looking into, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you're spot on in that tax increment financing is a traditional financing tool that governments across the country use. They generally use it for just broad kind of large scale economic development, if you
Right.
will. Right. So a perfect example of the way that we've used a TIF in the city of Baltimore is the TIF that was done in South Baltimore for Port Covington, for example, right? Or the new Baltimore Peninsula, I still call it Port Covington. That we issued TIF bonds in order to get that development, to spur the development that's occurring there. And so what we decided to do as an administration, and it wasn't just the Scott administration, we actually developed this model in conjunction, like I said, with Build, with GBC, but we also use some of our academic partners and some financial consultants to come together to look at the city's finances to figure out how we could generate more revenue to really address vacant housing at scale. And this idea about issuing a non-contiguous TIF bond focused on we would do it in tranches and it would be focused on vacant houses across the city. And so we are actually pursuing legislation for the first tranche of those non-contiguous TIF bonds. So I think we're doing about $20 or $25 million worth of non-contiguous TIF bonds. And this will be the first time that any city across the country has actually done this kind of non-contiguous TIF to address vacant housing. There are a number of jurisdictions that are looking at this model, but I think a lot of folks are trying to see if it works in the city of Baltimore. But again, if we are successful, then over the next 15 years, we could potentially generate about $150 million. And so instead of thinking about how we add, how we absorb $150 million into the city's kind of general fund financing, we said, let's look at other, outside of the box financing models in order to address this issue. And so we're going to pilot that first tranche of non-contiguous TIF bonds. If it works, then we'll issue another tranche of non-contiguous TIF bonds. But we're really excited. I think we are, on the cutting edge when it comes to issuing TIFs in this way. And we'll be working with academic partners and consultants to help evaluate the effects of this TIF.
So that does seem like an outside the box idea that I don't think I've heard of this anywhere other than in the works in Baltimore. The idea of we'll do tax increment financing, but rather than have this one rectangle or this one space, these eight blocks and then these 12 blocks and it's all in one spot. It's sort of a shotgun approach that, okay, we know we've got a pocket here, another pocket there. And if you put these several together collectively, they amount to a large enough area that you could actually you can justify the overhead of, okay, we'll do a bond, we'll do the arrangements, and we'll organize it on behalf of multiple small zones rather than just one gigantic one. So the non-contiguous, like the, archipelago of target areas seems like it's a way to maybe double down on some of the tools you already have in the bag, like enterprise zones or opportunity zones or things like that. A tax increment financing to target several small areas at once is fascinating, right? And I bet you're right. The folks in Detroit and Pittsburgh are watching closely to see this might be a groundbreaking idea. Then you go to the National League of Cities and you tell everybody this is a new idea. You all be doing this too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've stolen plenty of ideas from Detroit and Pittsburgh and everywhere else. And so we're excited to be on the cutting edge and the ground floor, of an approach like this. And so, as I said, we're moving forward on the first tranche. And when the way the mayor talks about it is we've done TIFs for major economic development projects across the city, right? And a lot of those TIFs are around the waterfront. Now we're actually going to use a tool in our toolbox to invest in neighborhoods and invest in communities. And so it's outside of the box, but maybe we're just flipping, kind of the approach on its head and really using it to reinvest in our communities.
Right. It makes a ton of sense to me. So I want to ask a big picture question that's kind of fiscal stuff. And I know the city has its own, fiscal and finance team and so forth. And I don't want to get super in the weeds, but just from your point of view as the planner on sort of what direction the ship is pointed, I'm interested in your big picture take. I know, the city had an initiative that was almost on the ballot. The courts kind of ruled it out because it was contrary to some stuff that's in the Constitution, but an initiative to reduce the city's property tax pretty aggressively, pretty swiftly. But at the same time, I know the city is facing similar issues, in some cases probably even more grave than your counterparts, but similar issues to all of our counties across the state, a challenge to just recruit and retain the staff you need for current services, for public safety and all other things that the city's trying to provide. And at the same time, we know the state and our local governments, including the city, are looking to level up support for public education through the blueprint for Maryland's future. So like these are arrows pointing in conflicting directions. There's a pressure for lower taxes, but then an obligation to maintain and improve service and even to expand and do more, particularly in education for the coming years. I mean, this is like the Gordian knot type situation. How do you forecast out a budget years ahead with all those challenges in the mix? There's no easy answer, I'm sure. I'm putting you on the spot, but you have big picture thoughts on how we can get through this?
Yeah, absolutely. So since the first day that I started in this role, that has been the thing that I've been thinking about is how do we diversify the city's revenue? How do we grow our revenue? And also while maintaining some of these competing priorities. So I think my first budget year as the city administrator was the year that we saw our Kerwin contribution increase by, I think, somewhere between $70 to $80 million, right? And over the first 2 years of the implementation of Kerwin, I think our total contribution to the school system has increased about 47%. And the thing that the mayor has made absolutely 100% clear is that we must invest in our school system. So investing in our city's young people and investing in Baltimore City's public school is a number one top priority of this administration. And so with that direction from the mayor, what I did was work with my finance team and my budget team to start a process to develop the city's 10-year financial plan, right? So the financial plan, I think at this point, maybe about 11 or so years ago, and we were able to save over $150 million by making some strategic investments and also some strategic cuts throughout the city. And so what we are doing now is reevaluating our 10-year financial plan and developing a plan to take us through the next 10 years. And so what that plan will outline are just opportunities for us to grow and diversify the city's revenues, right? We have to think outside of the box about how we grow our revenues outside of just property taxes, right? That plan is also evaluating strategies for us to actually reduce the property tax rate. So under the last 10-year financial plan, we actually were able to slowly but surely and incrementally decrease the city's tax rate over time. And so we are also looking at opportunities to reduce the tax burden on our residents as well. And so there are a number of kind of focus areas, capital investment. We have, at least a $3 billion deferred maintenance backlog in the city of Baltimore. Our facilities are outdated, aging, and old. And thanks to an infusion of resources through ARPA, we've been able to make some strategic investments into our recreation centers and to other facilities. But we know that that's not enough, right? And so the way that I am envisioning this with the mayor is for us to take that step back, look at the city that we want to be in the next 10 years, look at our current finances, and what do we need to do and where can we invest so that we are growing the tax base broadly, that we are diversifying the different sources of revenue that come into the city, and then also that we are refining and streamlining and making our services more efficient and effective so that we are, just really doing the best that we can with city taxpayer dollars. And all of that is going to come together in the 10-year financial plan that we are looking to have the mayor release in the spring.
All right. So I'm buying the philosophy here. And I have to say that the overall thinking here and the dimensions of your fiscal challenge for the city, sometimes the larger jurisdictions in Maryland maybe have more zeros on the number, but as it turns out, like some of these challenges are the same things for Allegheny County or for Dorchester County or for other corners of Maryland trying to deliver the best service. They're looking at their tax base and saying, where can we diversify? Where can we grow? What can we emphasize? And where do we have to change? In some cases, like where do we have to change tax policy so that we have the right clubs in the bag? If our tax policy is built around a 1970s economy, then you're missing things that could be contributing to public revenue just because we haven't thought of them yet. So there's a practical part of this, but also a political element. And I think local governments, we may need the help of our colleagues and partners at the state level to help us bring sort of the local budgets into the 21st century to reflect today's economy, not the one of our parents or the generation before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that we've been thinking about and talking about. The mayor put forward last year at the same time that we talked about issuing those TIF bonds to address vacant housing. The mayor, boldly announced that, we should be pursuing a state sales tax. And, we looked at other quote unquote NFL cities, and 80% of those cities have or are able to retain a portion of the sales tax, right? And even though that may not be something that feels realistic within the near future, I mean, those are the types of ideas that we are pursuing in the city of Baltimore. We're trying to think outside of the box. We're looking at what our peer jurisdictions are doing across the country, other independent cities, and how they're diversifying their revenues. And a number of those options do require us to go back to our partners at the state. But luckily, we have the best delegation in the state of Maryland that's out there advocating for the city of Baltimore. And so we know that they will be partners in the work as we think about how to grow our city.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate the big sweep, both about you and your role with the city, but also sort of just dropping knowledge here about what the plans are for the next page and the next chapter and the next volume in the Baltimore story. So appreciate you walking through all this sort of stuff. One of those questions they tell interviewers or reporters to ask is like, what didn't I ask that I should have? What else are we excited about? Or what else is good news in Baltimore that we didn't get into yet? Let's top this off.
Oh my goodness. You know what you didn't ask me, Michael? You didn't ask me my favorite spot to eat in Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding. This is the thing that
I'm ready. Let's compare notes. No, I want to do that because I've got a spot too, and I want to give them some free pub. Let's go.
Okay. So my favorite restaurant is Water for Chocolate, and a second favorite is the Urban Oyster. It's a new favorite.
Okay. All good. Well, I will give a shout out to my favorite Baltimore restaurant, the Land of Kush, and they have a vegan friendly crab cake. It's basically vegan soul food, and I make a point to go over there every time I'm in town, and then bring home a whole bag of stuff. So,
awesome. Well, we need your listeners to come visit us in the city of Baltimore and check out our food scene.
The food scene in Baltimore is pretty lit, so that's good. All right, yes. Good way to top off. I'm sorry I cut you off because you were getting on a roll, but I did want to touch the food stuff. So what else you got?
I think that's it. I mean, we've touched on so much about the city of Baltimore, and I think the thing that I want your listeners to take away is that the city of Baltimore is on the rise. There are so many amazing things that are happening here in the city of Baltimore. And under Mayor Scott's leadership, we are just really looking forward to growing our city, diversifying our city, bringing more exciting amenities and new things to our city. But we're also focused on getting the basics right. We know that there's work that we need to do to improve the accessibility of our streets. And we're working on kind of those core basic city services. But we also just want this to be a place where people can just live, they can work here, they can visit here, and feel excited to be here in the city of Baltimore. The last thing that we didn't talk about is public safety. And I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to talk about the leaps and bounds that the city of Baltimore has made under Mayor Scott's leadership in reducing public safety. Our homicide numbers they are just seeing some of the largest declines that we've ever seen in the city of Baltimore, and some of the largest declines nationally. So we I think last year we ended the year under 200 homicides for the first time since, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 2014. And we're seeing even deeper declines than we saw last year, this year. And so we are very, very much focused on public safety issues, and not just homicide, but quality of life issues. And so, again, the city of Baltimore is absolutely on the rise, and we want folks to come visit us to see.
Baltimore, lots of stuff going on. Folks should hopefully come to town for Orioles and Ravens games, especially playoff games at home, because we've got two very solid and exciting teams. So come for the sports, but stay for the culture and for the food, for the excitement, and for the fabric of a city that is on the rise. I love it. I love it as a great place to drop things off. Faith, thanks so much for taking some time with talking with us. Great to hear from City of Baltimore, and we will drop links in the chat to some of the things that you mentioned along the way. We will put things in our show notes to give details where folks can find out more. And one more thing before we go. So if you're planning to attend the Mako Winter Conference, we'll be down at the High Regency Chesapeake Bay Hotel in Cambridge, Maryland on December 11th through the 13th, and you're going to be there. We've got some important updates for you. First off, we know the Hyatt fills up fast, and being at the hotel really enhances that conference experience, so it's great if you can stay there. We're changing things up a little bit this year to make sure everyone has a fair shot at securing their room at the hotel. Reservations for the hotel will now be part of the conference registration process, meaning you must be registered as an attendee or an exhibitor to book a room. This will help prevent overbooking and those last-minute cancellations and so forth that throw a wrench in everyone's plans. Don't worry, though. We'll be announcing the registration details, including the exhibit and hotel room rates, very soon. This will give everyone enough time to get those approvals lined up before registration opens. Speaking of which, registration will open in phases, first for county elected officials, then county staff and Mako corporate partners, followed by sponsors and exhibitors, and finally, everybody else. We've also secured a secondary hotel just across the street, and we'll have a shuttle running between the two. So you'll be well taken care of no matter where you stay. Stay in the loop. Make sure you keep an eye on our website and blog, or you can sign up for conference updates at mdcounties.org/subscribe. I'll wrap things up for here. On behalf of Faith Leach, this is Michael Sanderson. On behalf of our producer, Chantel Malcolm Lim, if you like the podcast, be sure that you subscribe. That way, all these episodes will be sent right to the device of your choice. And make sure you follow us on social media. You should be on Twitter, Facebook, and of course, the Conduit Street blog. Thanks so much for joining this week. We will talk to you soon.